Is it in schools? Because as far as I'm aware, Drag Queen Story Hour is something
in
that's
any
hosted
place,
in
public.
libraries.
Well, but even that, like it's the same issue.
Even
places where children congregate. There is no reason that drag queens should be around there if they're young children. And
Why?
there are plenty of videos.
How does it hurt them? You already agreed that they can do it in a non-sexual way.
Yeah, topic is Drag Queen Story Hour. I was telling Dylan in the background, for people who don't know me, even though this is a right-wing debate channel, I am not right-wing by any normal person's standards. In fact, I debated Andrew a couple weeks ago quite passionately on the topic of gay marriage because I'm a staunch defender of gay marriage. And even though I think Andrew has backwards opinions that are genuinely wrong, I can still respect him and have a respectful conversation. And so on this topic of Drag Queen Story Hour, which is kind of vague, and I'm sure we'll dig into it because I imagine we disagree. I would hope we disagree. It would make for a fun debate if we don't. I don't have an issue with drag as a performance art at all. I've been to a drag show. It was actually more of a festival. The drag show was playing, but I've also been to strip clubs. And to be honest, the strip clubs are a little bit more depressing and I would say degenerate when you get all the 50-year-old lonely men kind of creeping out in the background. It's not a fun experience. If we want to talk about degeneracy, arguably the strip clubs are the more degenerate thing than the drag show. However, when it comes to inviting drag shows into schools, that gets weird to me. And I would make this analogy. If a school invited Hooters to cater for one of its events, I wouldn't say, okay, well, the moment that the Hooters waitresses come into the school, it's game over. The children have been the G word. I don't know. Can we say that? Roomed. But I would question why a school was making a decision to invite Hooters in to cater when there's many other options. And similarly, bringing in a drag queen or king or drag artist, I don't see any reason why a school would go out of its way to dedicate time and resources towards bringing, someone like that in when there's, plenty of other options. Why not just get a clown if you're talking about, hey, well, it makes the kids excited about learning, it's fun. It's like, I'm pretty sure, Barney and clown costumes are available all the time. But as soon as it becomes drag, I have to wonder why. And, there's reasons we can get into in terms of its, kind of inherent sexuality to it and kind of the degree to which it either reinforces stereotypes or challenges them. I don't know if it's one or the other necessarily. I actually think it reinforces stereotypes in a lot of ways. So my position is I don't think it should be illegal. I think, governors or whoever that crack down on stuff, that's an overreach of government power in and of itself. But if I was on a school board or I was a parent and I had kids and I was speaking at a school board meeting, I personally would strongly recommend against not doing Drag Queen Story Hour, not bringing drag queens into a school. And I think that's perfectly reasonable. And I don't believe that people who are against Drag Queen Story Hour, by and large, are, feeling anything other than rightfully kind of confused, let's say. So, yeah, I'm curious to hear what Dylan's perspective is. And hopefully we can do this.
7 minutes on the clock, Dylan. Go ahead.
Okay, I won't need all 7 minutes. I'll try to keep it generally short and sweet. I view drag similarly to how I view like most forms of art, whether it be like rap, R&B, or like types of painting genres and stuff like that, types of dance, or what would be maybe a more pressing example would be maybe like Japanese kabuki art, which relies heavily on male actors playing female roles while telling stories. I don't think that any of these art forms are inherently sexual, but sometimes they can be more or less dominated by sexuality depending on the art form, or have a lot of sexuality in it. There are rap songs that have absolutely nothing to do with sex, and then there's other rap songs that's just about like fucking bitches, getting hoes, shooting up, whatever. And there's rap songs all across the spectrum. This is the same about jazz. R&B is something that has a lot of sexual songs about getting down and getting dirty, but there are also R&B songs that are absolutely appropriate for children and people of all ages to consume. And I view drag in a similar fashion to this. And I think there's like a lot of cultures around the world that have forms of drag, even if they didn't always call it drag, but it could still be filed under drag. When I talk about, for example, Japanese kabuki art, which is this type of art that relies heavily on using fans to tell a story and performance with exaggerative type of like body motions, there's a lot of male actors. Actually, it was illegal for a period of time for females to even play these roles, and these male actors actually performed as females, and some of those stories that they told were sexual, but the art form definitely today is not an inherently sexual art form. And when you see these males playing female roles in these types of art forms, in this type of art, it's not inherently sexual. And so my stance, I think, is very simple. I don't think we should have sexual art around children, period. I don't think we should have songs about, you know, fucking bitches and shooting hoes around kids, but a lot of kids have that stuff around them all the time these days on the radio, or they listen to it on Spotify. I don't think they should have those types of movies around children. The same thing is also true for violence until they get to like an age that is appropriate, which I would assume a parent would determine when a certain type of violent or slightly suggestive movie would be appropriate for their child. But when we talk about drag, I think it is perceived as an inherently sexual art form, even though there's been multiple examples of it not being sexual. For example, there's been drag shows that are horror-based, like Dragula is an example of that. That is a horror-based drag show about making costumes and drag performances that are scary with very long nails and like blood and stuff like that. While that's still not appropriate for children, it isn't inherently sexual. And I think those types of art forms also exist for age appropriate for children. Nina West is a drag performer I would point to as somebody who engages in, I would think, child-friendly drag performances. They have actually been featured on the Nickelodeon channel. They have worked with, they have worked with Drag Queen Story Hour in the past. And I think this idea around Drag Queen Story Hour, as far as I'm aware, maybe I'm wrong, but Drag Queen Story Hour, the majority of these events, or I don't know if really any event that's actually located in schools, as in this is a school hosted event, usually it's at a local library where parents can choose to bring their kids to it. So a lot of the like panic about Drag Queen Story Hour isn't even drag is being forced on your children by your kid goes to school and now they've just happened upon a drag queen event and now you're there as a parent and you can't guide them and tell them or explain the experience or explain what they're exactly looking at. This is usually parents taking their children of their own free will to one of these Drag Queen Story Hour performances, staying with their child as a drag queen, maybe does a little song and dance, then reads a book, and the parents are always present, and and they make sure everybody's comfortable. And so I think as long as that's what's being practiced, I have no problem with it because I view drag just like any other art. But there is drag that is sexual that children don't need to be around. And if there is sexuality in a drag performance, that should be clearly advertised. And if they fail to advertise it, that's the fault of the drag performers. And I do think they should be held accountable.
Appreciate that opening statement. Everybody out there in Crucible land, make sure that you like, share, subscribe, boost the algorithm, all that shit that you're supposed to do. I'm gonna open the floor up here. I don't know why I have this bizarre camera delay. Is there any of that on your guys' end?
You do have a camera delay on my end.
Yeah,
I can hear you though.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell is going on, but it's okay because we're going to take the screen off here in just a second for a little bit while I finish eating. Nobody wants to see anybody eating. That's gross. But I'm still going to be right here listening, and I'll interject if I need to. Gentlemen, the floor is open.
Okay, well, I mean, it sounds like we're pretty much aligned on. I'm glad we're on the same line of if it's sexual, it should not be around children. I guess you said drag is like any other art form. There's sexual forms and non-sexual forms. Okay, I guess I can agree with that to some degree. I think when when people say the word drag, if I think of a drag show, I think most people would think of a sexual type show, right?
I mean, that's
like RuPaul's Drag Race is
drag has that perception, yeah.
Right. So is it fair to say that because drag largely has that perception that when most people are referring to drag, they're referring to the sexual aspect of it, or referring to drag with a sexual aspect?
I mean, I think like how people perceive, like you could say like rap music, right? Is rap music inherently violent? Is rap music inherently about fucking bitches and getting hoes? I mean, that's the perception it has in society, but I don't think it like inherently is about that. There's a lot of rap music that is very fulfilling, and a lot of it even very spiritual.
Sure, I think drag is much more specific though. Like drill is a specific type of rap, and I think drill, it would be fair to say, isn't it like
there's different,
exactly
but the thing is drag is just like one label. There's different types of drag. There's different types of drag performances, different genres of drag. Like for example, Dragula, which is a horror drag variety, which is leaning into body deformity and like trying to scare you and make it look like eyes are popping out during these dance performances. It is not sexual. It is actually, I actually don't like to watch it. It's actually too gross for me. But like a lot of people that I know are really into that.
Okay. What distinguishes drag from just like a clown, for example? Can a clown be a type of drag?
I mean, you could drag as a clown, hypothetically. The thing is about drag, the thing that makes it drag is the
character, right? It's the gender bending, right? It's the exaggerated sexual characteristics and stuff.
It's bending into gender, but when we talk about like exaggerated sexual characteristics, when I look at someone like Nina West, right? I don't know if you know who Nina West is. She's a very famous drag performer. It's okay if you don't know who she is specifically, but she is somebody who's generally very tame. If you look at her drag outfits, it's usually extremely puffy hair, and she's wearing like a big puffy dress, and she's worked with a lot of she's got
some low cut bras on. I just Google image
and Nina. As far as I've seen, it's usually been generally. I mean, yeah. If you
or Andrew, do you want me to share my screen, or can you pull up a screen?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Sure. But when we talk about these performances that I think are like generally going to be more child friendly, they're going to change how they present themselves and how they present the art form. For example, like I talked about Japanese kabuki art earlier, there is like exaggerations of feminine qualities, but just having a feminine quality or gender bending does not make it inherently sexual. Showing something that's feminine doesn't make it something inherently sexual. For example, like the type of motions that certain drag performers will use, they will choose specifically feminine motions to use in a performance, especially in Japanese kabuki art, but that doesn't make it inherently sexual.
Sure. Okay, I'm aware. Let me just here.
Like if I was to like twirl my hair or like do something like that, or like do something like some feminine type motion, that doesn't immediately transfer into sex.
Sure.
And
right,
having
hold on,
sex or having conversations with children about sex.
That's fair. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, this is Nina West, right?
Yep.
So, to me, I mean, it's a matter of perception. I can see what you're saying, big puffy hair, she's not like in a bikini or something, but like it's pretty heavy cleavage, I'd say.
I would say that's something you would expect to see on just about like any Hollywood runway.
Well, drag for sure. But so like when we're talking about drag queen story art, like if this is around children,
that's not what they're gonna be performing in around children. If you see what she performs in around children, it's like she almost looks like Doubtfire.
You do agree that there are instances of children being around this type of stuff, right?
Yeah, of course.
And it's labeled as drag queen story hour.
Is labeled as drag queen story hour. Well,
it's drag performance for children.
Drag performance. Well, it's not. Well, it depends on the order. Drag queen story hour, I think, has generally been above board, but there have been examples of drag performances that children should not be at that they end up being at. Right. I think that is the fault of sometimes the parents not knowing that it was that type of event, and or the fault of the organizers for not properly advertising it. But
I agree with you on that. I 100% agree with you on that.
But me acknowledging that there's outliers or there's examples of people not being responsible and advertising what exactly a performance was going to be, like happens all the time in the music industry, where this is a child-friendly show and then they start rapping about sex and all this other stuff, doesn't mean that the entire art form is inherently sexual.
Sure. And maybe we can move away from the semantic point, because I think we're on the same page. I just, the reason I'm
what's the semantic?
I understand.
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Well, you're pointing out, you're saying drag can encompass non-sexual and sexual elements, right? Yeah. There's a normal distribution. On the outliers, there's the extreme elements, which is like which you and I would agree is like actual degeneracy of children, like touching drag performers in a disgusting and GROOMING.
If anything happens between a drag performer or a child that is sexual or it's suggestive or anything like that,
right,
that person should be held accountable.
Right. So we're on the same page.
As should be true about like rap music and any other type of art
course,
form.
yes. And the Catholic Church and any teacher, anything like that is wildly inappropriate. So that's one end of the spectrum. And then you're saying, well, there's another end of the spectrum, which is basically just clowns, like kabuki or whatever. It's like, okay, fair enough. But then there's this giant part in the middle, which is like, yeah, it's not children touching the drag artists, but like when people think of drag, like I watched some of RuPaul Drag Race's highlights, prior to this debate, because it was on before, but I never really sat down and watched it. I'm like, all right, I'll sit down and actually.
What's the TV or age rating for RuPaul's Drag Race? Do you know?
Hopefully it's more than like TV 14 or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. That's why I was asking.
Okay, no, but it was clearly not made for kids.
Okay.
But that's my point, is drag as an art form. I like the average conception of drag. I just don't believe is like, oh, well, the average conception of drag is like something non-sexual that kids can participate in. It's like the nature of drag is drag shows. You go to any city and you go to a drag show. If it's not sexual, I would imagine it's not a good drag show and pretty boring. So like when people say drag,
I would disagree with you on that, but that's fine.
Okay, well, I mean, it's kind of like, it's like football. It's like, well, is football inherently American real football, not soccer, of course. Is American football like a dangerous sport? It's like, well, I could say, well, yes, because there's all this contact. And then someone could say, well, technically there's flag football and that's no contact. It's like, okay, yes, well, you've given one exception to what everyone normally thinks of when they think of football. Well, and when everyone thinks of drag, I mean,
I think
again, this is why it's a semantic thing, because you're saying not everyone thinks that. I'm like,
I think a better comparison would be rap, again, like rap music, like rap music.
No,
wait,
if you go,
if you go to
right now,
if I could come up with a Kid Family drag show right now. I mean, like I can point to
okay.
Well, let me just make my point clear.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, if you see the popular conception of rap music in the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, as Black people entered wider society more and more after the Jim Crow era, perceptions of the Black community and perceptions of rap were largely dominated by like this NWO, fight the power, fuck the police, coming straight from the underground. And if you were to go to an average rap show, there's probably going to be at least a few cuss words in it, right? There's not a lot of rap shows you go to that I know of. I've been to a few. I'm not a huge rap guy, but if you go to most, there's probably going to be some cussing or possibly possible mentions of violence, sexual themes, smoking of the Mary Jane. The vast majority of rap is going to have some number of that in it. And that's how rap's perceived. If you were to like make a stereotypical rap song right now, it would be something like, I got the shawty and I da-da-da. It'd be something along those lines. And that's how people perceive it. But that doesn't mean that you cannot create rap music that is friendly for children, or that there isn't rap that exists that's friendly for children. And that stuff should be advertised as friendly for children. In fact, they've made industries around it. For example, like what's that called? The kids pop stuff, where they'll like specifically take songs and they'll try.
That is not an argument. Friendly. That shit should be banned. Kids pop
should be banned. I agree with you on that. But it's I guess I'm saying like the majority of rap music is probably not something that I would show a 5-year-old. But that doesn't mean there isn't rap that I probably would be comfortable with them hearing.
Okay, I understand everything that you said, and I agree with it. I don't think it's a fair metaphor, but let's move down this point.
Why isn't it a fair metaphor?
Well, because here's why. Because if I were to say, like, what is the criteria for something being rap music? It's like, well, I don't even know. It's like it's not singing so much.
We need to tie the thread into the actual topic.
We need a moderator to shut the no. That's fair. Okay. All right. Let's move into this different subject. What is the point of Drag Queen Story Hour at all? Why even have anything that could be labeled as drag? Because you could say, that's why I asked, like, is a clown a type of drag? You say, well, yeah, like on the margins, it's kind of a drag. It's like, okay, well then we're just redefining drag in a certain way. What is the point of having the gender bending specifically? I mean, what you gave some criteria early. Yeah. What are the criteria for making drag, and why is it important to be in schools?
Well, it's the gender. Again, I never said it was important to be in schools. And as far as I know, Drag Queen.
Why is it a positive thing at all?
Why is it a positive thing? Well, I don't even need to argue it's a positive thing. I could argue that it's just a morally neutral thing, right? If something's morally neutral, it probably shouldn't be banned or or like told that it should stop or something like that. Because I like if someone asked me, is rap good or morally neutral or bad, like I could just be, it's morally neutral. But but the thing is, I think it depends on the drag performance. When it's drag queen story hour, it's probably A, to read a book to a child and to improve reading comprehension skills, and B, to probably introduce them to a community that a lot of children probably don't have many experiences at a young age. An example of this, let me give it a comparison. I live in Maryland, and I remember a few times, and this was actually at school, there would be these cultural performances where they would have people display like African like culture and music and stuff like that, and drum solos and stuff like that. Why in particular does it have to be African? Why couldn't it just be a normal drum solo? Why couldn't it be like a non-African drum solo? I think it is to introduce children to the wide diversity of the world generally, and to introduce them not only to a diverse range of experiences, but a diverse range of people. Because young people, as they get older, are going to run into a diverse range of people and art forms. And I also do believe that it is important to culturally enrich young people with art. I'm a libcuck. I believe that art is important, and it's important for society to feel fulfilled. I'm a big supporter of like investments in the public arts and museums and stuff like that.
Me too. Okay, I don't think I disagreed with anything you said, except for
great, Andrew.
It's not just we're exposing, like, yeah, obviously we should expose people to different cultures and whatnot, but it's like, okay, again, drag is about the gender bending and the accentuation of like sexual characteristics, right? It's not really drag unless there's some of that. Okay.
When you say sexual characteristics,
like breasts on a drag queen,
I think you can do a drag performance without, like, I mean, most of them do have bigger breasts, but you can do drag. The only thing that requires for a drag performance to occur is that you bend gender stereotypes. If I was to put on a dress right now, just as I am, and I was to read a book to a child, I could label that as a drag performance. Is that inappropriate? You and I would probably say no. I don't think this child was hurt in any way. You can say that it didn't help the child because I'm a shit reader or whatever.
So this is my point. I guess this is my broader point.
Okay, sorry, continue.
So this entire issue, Drag Queen Story Hour, is a controversial issue. People are upset about it. There's been literal like bombings of places because of this. Is a high intensity issue. My question is, what possible advantage could there be? And let's keep it high schoolers and college, whatever. I mean, you can do whatever you want. College is not even the question. I'm talking about for young children, like the children that people see in videos, 5th graders, 6th graders, whatever, that type of stuff. Why would a school not just, why is it not reasonable, and I would say morally right, for a school to say, you know what, let's teach LGBT inclusive sex education. Let's, make sure that kids are aware that, there are people who have, just like there are people who have a mom and a dad, there are people who have 2 dads, people who have 2 moms, all this. We don't need to bring in drag artists to teach kids, to expose kids to a particular culture, let's say a subculture, at like anything even remotely approaching a young age, especially because, it's so controversial to begin with. Why even do that? It just seems like it's like, oh, well, we're just going to do it just to kind of throw it in the face of the conservatives almost at this point. Because you said you don't say anything positive about it. It's just morally neutral. So my thing is
I said to defend it, I don't need to even argue that it's positive. I can just argue that it's morally neutral.
Do you believe it's positive or not?
I think it has been positive in some instances. It depends on the specific drag performance. But I don't even need to argue that's positive to say that it should be allowed or it's okay to bring a kid to. I think it's morally neutral to bring your kids to the Minions movie, right? I don't need to argue about all the positives of it to say that it's okay.
Do you think it's morally neutral to bring your kids to Hooters?
No.
Why?
Because it is an inherently sexual experience.
What is inherently sexual about a Hooters waitress?
It's how the whole business model is designed. The business model is designed to appeal to people and advertise to people around making sure that you can ogle at people's sexual bits and enhancing that experience. That's the whole advertising.
I feel bad for asking you what makes Hooters inherently sexual, because I know, because we all agree it's inherently sexual, and I'm asking that because it's like, it's odd for me to kind of understand. It's like, okay, drag is not inherent, even though drag is about gender bending and kind of the accentuation of sexual characteristics, at least to some degree. That's not inherently sexual, but women wearing, like revealing clothing, that is inherently sexual.
Can I ask you a question?
And it's like, Yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
The reason I'm making this analogy, just real quick, the reason I'm making this analogy is because I don't see a difference between Hooters and drag artists coming to schools. It's like it's not like
oh man, I disagree with that on so many levels.
How?
Because,
if they're both inherent,
well, number one,
both have that sexual aspect to it, then why?
Hooters is based upon, well, if you don't have the same sexual aspect on it, Hooters is based upon having women wear as little as clothing as possible so you can look at them in a sexual manner while you eat food.
That's your perception. What about the people who go there and just say they like the food?
If you listen to Hooters executives or Hooters business rooms, or you look at any of the talk about how they promote their business or the advertisement, that's not how I perceive it. That's how Hooters perceives it. That's the company's business model.
Okay, but I can say the same thing. The company's business model is to take
advantage of male sexuality, or people's at least desire for female presentation of sexuality, and get you to watch it while you eat your food.
Have they said that explicitly? I'm kind of. You could be right. I find it hard to believe, though, a CEO would come out and say that.
They don't say it that blatant.
What do they say exactly? Okay, go ahead.
We need pretty women in these costumes to have men look at them. Something along those lines. We need to have something along those lines. Do we? I'm gonna be for real. I think we both know that Hooters, the Hooters advertising campaign, is inherently sexual. They're preying upon it.
I agree with you, but I feel the exact same way about drag. It's like, really, drag isn't sexual.
The difference is the customer. Really? Okay, if we're gonna make the comparison here, okay, me putting on a dress is not sexual, right? We already agreed. It seemed earlier that me just putting on a dress isn't sexual, even though that's the only barrier that I would need to cross for it to be drag. Now, you can say that there's certain drag performances that are sexual, but inherently drag isn't sexual. When we talk about Drag Queen Story Hour and we compare it to Hooters, let's compare it to Hooters. Drag performances, I see more clothes on human beings only at drag. The most of the time I see the most clothes on people is at these drag performances, especially at Drag Queen Story Hour. You got big ass wigs, big poofy dresses, tons of makeup, tons of jewelry, tons of they put themselves in these clothes to be as flamboyant and as colorful and explosive as possible. Why do kids like it? Kids like it the same reason why they like to have keys rattled in front of their face.
Clowns,
because it's colorful and stuff like that. But
why do you need to introduce the drag element? Why not just have it be clowns?
Why do you need to introduce children to young African culture or any other types of culture?
I would not compare drag culture, which is about sexual identity, to African culture. Sexual identity and
wait, let me ask you. Number one, it's not necessarily only about sexual identity, because drag culture hasn't just been practiced by gays and homosexuals and stuff, but it is dominated by queer people, absolutely. But the thing is, there's what makes it what makes it different that
we could take certain things for granted here.
Well, what's different? What's the problem with queer culture being presented compared to Black or African or any other culture? There's a difference.
And there's no problem with, like I said, we should teach LGBT inclusive sex education. And my issue, we can do that. And in fact, that's what I grew up with. And I'm bitching out Andrew in defense of gay marriage. So I turned out okay. So why do we need to introduce drag queens into the classroom? What are you achieving with that you aren't with just regular LGBT inclusive curriculum?
Because kids, okay, if I take a 5 or 6 year old and sit them down and I'm like, hello, Billy, I want to talk to you about Stonewall. That kid's going to snore. He's going to... He doesn't care.
Why are you teaching a 5-year-old about Stonewall? Why not teach a 13 or 14 or 15-year-old about Stonewall?
Okay, well, you can do that. But my point is, children like colorful, flashing colors. Drag dominates when it comes to that. They're the kings of colorful, flashing colors, being extremely explosive and out there with your movements and out there with your performances.
You're describing a character.
You're describing clown. But the thing is, what I guess my question to you is, what makes it, from the fact that this is drag now, that it's wrong in comparison to a clown? This is now wrong.
The accentuated breasts and the gender bending.
Wait, when you say the accentuated breasts, let me do you want me
to pull up the person that you had?
Yeah, we already looked at them earlier. You can show them again if you want. What is it about this person having? Okay, let me just ask you, what is it about this person having artificial breasts that makes it inherently sexual? This is a real question.
Is this a real question?
Yes, it is a real question.
I thought we were going to agree that, for example, Hooters, we both know is sexual. And now you're asking me, what about artificial breasts is sexual?
I'm asking, no, just answer the question.
What about having giant artificial breasts is sexual?
I didn't say giant artificial breasts. I said artificial breasts.
I'm not saying we're talking about drag performers. How about you just show the image?
Let me ask you. Do you think there's any scenario where somebody could have artificial breasts around a child and it would be appropriate?
There, not so many. This Nina West is the drag queen you mentioned. I'll just have the audience decide: is this inherently sexual in any way? Well, it's not like oh my god.
This is not what they're. Okay, to be clear, this isn't what they wear during performances of children.
All right, how about this? Can you pull up a single image of what the kids see, and we can evaluate it?
Okay, you could look up the Blue's Clues song that Nina West did. That was that played on Nickelodeon.
Drag Queen Story Hour in person though. That's what. Do you have one of? Because everything I've seen,
I was led to believe we were just talking about drag.
Wasn't this Drag Queen Story Hour?
I mean,
whatever it is,
Drag Queen Story Hour. But I think like if we just talk about if I've sit here to have the moral conduct, just to debate Drag Queen Story Hour, I thought we were talking about drag and children generally.
Hold on, I'm looking up Nina West and Blue's Clues. I'll share it.
I mean, that does seem to fit the trend of both, Dylan.
What seems to fit the trend?
Well, he's not really moving off topic, or I would kind of move him back on. He seems to be addressing the point of sexualization within drag queen story hour. That seems fair
to me. When it comes,
can you guys see my screen?
No, I cannot see your screen.
This is Drag Queen Blue's Clues. This is the example Dylan gave. Well, this is an animated cartoon, so obviously, I mean, I would question.
Well, they did. She did actually come on screen for a little bit on a few other occasions. I think.
Like this,
and on this, yeah, stuff like that. Basically, does that look like something that would harm a child in any way?
Well, honestly, not really. But like, I could say the same thing about a woman in a bikini where kids go to the beach. It's like there's a kid standing next to a woman in a bikini at a beach. Is that inherently bad? It's like no.
This woman
but in a classroom, that's weird.
Like I mean, like it covers. Like,
no, I know, but she's embodying drag, or I don't know, and I genuinely don't know, when referring to someone who's not transgender but drag, do you refer to them as he or she?
Usually you refer to them just a performance,
okay.
But I don't know their pronouns, so I don't.
Fine. She is engaging in drag, which is an art form my point is that's got an element of sexuality built into it. And we keep, disagreeing on
an element of homosexuality. Okay, you say, okay.
I didn't say sorry, not homosexuality, an element of sexuality.
Okay, so you seem to be set on this idea that like, well, a lot of in these drag performers, some of them have like artificial breasts. That seems to be like the main thing that we're focusing on is the artificial breasts.
Usually, artificial breasts people focus on a lot.
There is a lot of situations where I think breasts can even be like emphasized, and I don't think it's like inherently sexual. There are situations where it's meant to be sexual, like breasts are actually the perfect example of something that can be presented in the sexual light and then not presented in the sexual light. Like when it comes to breastfeeding, that is not sexual at all. That is a natural thing for a woman to do. You don't need to necessarily think you need to be able to do it in public, but a lot of people are very like fervorous defenders of like women being able to do that in public. And there's a way for you to use breasts in a specifically sexual way to get like sexual gratification out of it, right? Sure. Now, in these performances, these artificial breasts, even if they're artificial breasts, they aren't being presented in a sexual way. They're not being like, "Hey, kids." They're not.
How do you know that? Hold on. I have seen multiple videos, multiple times of that exactly that happening. Now here's the issue. We keep coming.
Again, if you want me, I'm not going to be able to defend.
Let me finish.
Okay.
I know. Okay. The issue is we're going to keep coming around to you're going to give instances where it's not sexual. I'm going to give instances where it is sexual, and then we're just going to go back to, well, is it inherently sexual?
So
again, I'll leave it to the
sexual. If there's examples of it's not being sexual, and you agreed that there's examples of it not being sexual, like it talked about earlier and gave examples of, then
the middle of the distribution, the distribution is sexual. If on the extreme end it's very sexual, and on the other end it's not sexual, there's a middle end it's pretty sexual. I mean, again, look.
So wait. I need to hammer you down on this, because under that you just basically said that drag is not inherently sexual. Because even if your argument is that on this
not all cases of drag are but see, I don't even agree with that, because you just described clowns. What you describe is a clown. And yes, I agree clowns are not inherently sexual, but a non-sexual form of drag and a clown is indistinguishable.
Drag is there's a lot of art forms that are very similar. Yes.
Okay. I took it for granted that, and fair enough, I get why this is a contentious debate, not just between us, but, in the broader culture, is, I assumed when people talk about drag, like I said with football, it's like if I talk about football, and actually that's a bad example because people could think soccer, but if I was talking about like American football, and then someone says, well, but flag football is an instance of football where there's no contact. And so if the debate was, well, is American football dangerous? And someone says, well, there's flag football and there's no contact there, at all. So you agree football is not inherently dangerous. It's like, okay, you've won on like a semantic redefining of terms, but like, again, everyone knows, I think, what drag is. And even in its milder forms, I still do not see any reason whatsoever why it should be introduced in schools as opposed to just regular LGBTQ plus education of just, hey, there are gay people, there are trans
I never
people.
said it should be introduced to schools. I'm defending the idea. Because you keep bringing up a thing that's largely, I don't even think, happening. The idea that the drag queen story hour is bringing people to schools. Drag queen story hours, as far as I know, because I looked at actually hosting one of these in my community recently. They're usually done at libraries. They're done at local libraries, and the parents choose to take their kids to the library to do it. It's not.
Well, if Hooters comes to the library, then we have no problem.
But again, these are not the same thing, and I keep having to bring it back around here. But you just bring up the example of football. If I have to engage with football because the rap one is like you don't think it's comparable, let's engage with it for a second. Are there forms of football that you think are appropriate to introduce to children? Even though,
absolutely,
because if I was to look at the the New York Giants taking on the Redskins, Washington, what's their team name now? The Washington Football.
Wow, that's pretty racist. Clip him.
Hey,
Dylan Burns is done.
I grew up in a pro. I grew up in Maryland,
Commanders,
in the DC, in the Washington DC area. Okay, we got merch like all over the house. I can't escape it. But the thing is, that is not appropriate for a child to participate in. They'll die. They'll get curb stomped. And in fact, I would even say that
I agree.
And so, but there is a form of football that I do think is appropriate for them.
Right, flag football.
Flag football, or more something that's a custom and specifically designed to introduce this sport to young children, as is Drag Queen Story Hour.
You're changing the analogy. I was making the point, if I came into a debate and the debate was about is football dangerous, and I came in prepared to cite concussion statistics and all that. Right. Okay. Look, and maybe this is the important part. Maybe the important point of agreement here is that you do not think it should be in schools either. You just don't necessarily think it should be banned or something like that.
I don't think it should be in. I mean, I don't think it should be in school. I just don't care about it being in school. I'm like neutral on it being in school. If the school had them, I was whatever. If a school didn't have, I'm not like pushing for it either.
You don't blame anyone
because I don't think it hurts anybody. I don't think it hurts anybody. I think it'd be no different in my mind than like having a mascot come and like doing like a funny dance before a test, which happened a lot when I was a kid. Well, I don't know why why would they do that all the time? They bring mascots to dance for tests, but for me, it's like I view it the same way. Now,
sure.
Like so.
Well, hold on. But you don't have any. So you do not have. If a conservative group said we do not want Drag Queen Story Hour in our schools, and we're going to go campaign about that, you have no problem with
I have zero problem about it because they're already not in the schools anyway.
Okay, but let's say
it'd be like me saying I do not want Nazis to take over the state of California. It's like they're not going to. Okay.
Are you comparing drag queens to Nazis, Dylan?
No, I'm just saying you're saying something that isn't happening.
I was the one who was progressive here.
True. I'm just saying it's not something that's possible or like happening.
Okay,
I mean, maybe it's possible in like 50 years from now or something, but it's just not happening. So it's just like, if they want to ban it.
Okay. Well, it is happening.
Not ban it, but
I don't think there would be violence committed by people if it was not happening.
It's Drag Queen Story Hour in schools.
I have a video. What's that?
You're saying your shorts happening, or there would be no violence. Is it in schools? Because as far as I'm aware, Drag Queen Story Hour is something
in
that's
any place,
in
public.
Libraries.
Well, but even that, like it's the same issue.
Even
places where children congregate, there is no reason that drag queens should be around there if they're young children. And
Why?
There are plenty of videos.
How does it hurt them? You already agreed that they can do it in a non-sexual way.
I don't know if I'll send this video to Andrew via Discord. You can tell me if this breaks TOS, because this is just a video of children at different drag.
Okay.
Different drag events.
This is how these debates always go. It's like, well, let's talk about this as a whole, and if this art form, there's examples of it that can be appropriate to children and not be appropriate to children. And what it always becomes is, oh, really? Well, look at this 1, 2, 3, 4,
That's
5.
What you're doing by saying there's small numbers of examples where drag isn't sexual.
Well, yes, and you're saying that there's small examples or that it was sexual. Yes, or it's sexual around children. So wait.
All right,
the thing
can't do this.
But my only argument is that it's not inherently sexual, and if it's not inherently sexual and it's performative and kids enjoy it, then I have no problem with this art form being introduced to children. I don't think it's harmful, right? And your argument is, well, there is sexual examples of it. I'm like, okay, keep that away from children then. But the non-sexual examples of it, when they're just reading books to children. Yeah, that's in the norm with rap music.
Okay,
is
let's
that
talk about this. How about this? Let's approach a different angle.
Talks about drugs. It talks about a lot of things that aren't appropriate to children, and that's why the majority of rap music probably wouldn't introduce to a child. But I would introduce certain rap music to a child. I
respect you, and I think we're going around in circles, and so I want to get your opinion on this because it's a different line of discussion. I think it broadens it out and makes it more interesting.
Okay.
One of the reasons that I'm against bringing drag queens into schools is because I think that let's assume it's a very non-sexual, like the Nina West Blues Clues one, where it's like it's not the worst version of it. Okay. My issue is that that seems to reinforce sexual stereotypes and gender binaries. How is that an inclusive form of education? How does that teach kids, hey, if you're a boy or you're a female, or if you're a boy and you like to play with dolls and you like wear pink, and if you're a girl and you like to play with trucks and you like to wear blue, you can do any of that. It doesn't matter. But when drag queens are brought into the fold, it's kind of like, oh, this is a person being a queen, being a female. And what it means to be female is, well, what makes them a drag queen is all of their, flamboyant kind of accentuated features. And it's like, how is that anything but regressive in terms of teaching kids that gender is a spectrum and you can be anything you want and you don't need to exaggerate any sort of stereotypical characteristics?
Well, the thing is, a lot of people enjoy exaggerating those characteristics or leaning into those characteristics. Okay. I know a lot of, for example, I know people who are gay and they're stereotypically gay. You know what I mean? They've got this, their voice sounds gay, and you know what I mean when I say that.
Wow, I didn't say it, he did. Clip him. He said it, not me.
It's me, Hateful Dylan coming out again. Andrew's converted me. There's all this other stuff, right? Like that is very clearly presented as queer, and even stereotypically queer. But if that's what they want to be and how they want to present themselves, I think that's up to them.
That has nothing to do with the question I asked you.
But you said, well, I don't, like, if somebody leans into something that you could be considered a stereotype, as long as that's how they want to present themselves, I'm generally
We're not talking about whether or not it's good for the drag artist. We're talking about whether or not, is it not a good thing for children to be taught that gender is socially constructed in part, and that it is a spectrum, and there are males who can be, who can like pink or whatever, all the stereotypes. Males can do whatever girls want on average, and females can do whatever boys want on average. How are the drag queens helping push that message and not doing the exact opposite of saying, oh, well, I'm a man dressed in a woman, I'm a queen, and this is what makes me the queen. I'm a drag queen because of all this stuff. It seems like you're reinforcing.
If anything, I think it does the exact opposite. Because if it's a man dressing as a woman, it's saying, if anything, you're rejecting, like, hey, as a man, you don't have to wear a jean jacket and smoke all the time and chop lumber and kill people in wars. You can, like,
do you think that message is prominent nowadays?
Yes, you do. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead, guys.
You gotta let me finish. You gotta let me finish my point. You don't got to do that. Right. If you want to be feminine, if you want to wear a big poofy hair, wear makeup, if you want to trance around and do that, and that's how you want to present yourself, that's how you want to perform, that's how you want to engage. And when it comes to art, you want to engage in a way that's not traditionally masculine, you're allowed to do that as a man or as a woman or as anybody. You're allowed to play with these aspects of gender and presentation in any way you want, because you're a free human being. If anything, drag is an unbelievably accepting art form. It is very, very accepting. Definitely when it comes to how people want to present themselves. If I wanted to go to a drag show and present in a very feminine way that, isn't how I would usually present somewhere else, I'm positive they would accept me. And if anything, I think that's more breaking gender norms, not reinforcing them.
You're buying even the way that you described it. If I present it in a more feminine way, or I can embrace whatever characters, it's like, yes, I agree. We should be teaching kids. They're like males and females. Yeah, obviously there's a biological reality of that, and there's always going to be permanent differences between males and females. But when it comes to like how you dress and all that, it's like you can pretty much have leeway. But again, and unless you are really going to destroy the definition of drag completely and say, well, there's non-binary drag performers where they literally just dress up in there's no gender bending at all. It's just pure non-binary. It's like, that's not drag at all.
So you're saying gender bending's harmful for children because it reinforces stereotypes.
If it's done stereotypically like drag does, yes.
It's done stereotypically. Wait, well, the thing is, some people just end up being stereotypical. Like, that just happens, and you present yourself stereotypically. When you do characters, they are stereotypical. Like that can happen. Like there are going to be like women in the world who are blonde hair, blue eyed, just housewife, just, you know, making the pie, and that's just like who they are. That's how they present, and that's how they present themselves.
Okay. There is not a single drag queen that unless find me an example, and I'm genuinely curious, you know, maybe not now, but someone in your audience watching can pull up an example, and you know, I'll appreciate it. Find me what is an example of a drag queen that is not embodying stereotypically female characteristics, that isn't just a clown. To be a drag queen is to embody stereotypically female characteristics. Otherwise, she's not a drag queen.
So it doesn't
yes,
mean
that's
just be
literally
a clown.
what they're doing.
There's a lot of drag that isn't just clownish. A lot of it is like very much like a lot of drag performers try to look as beautiful as possible. Like, I'm gonna try to look like Marilyn,
in a stereotypically female way,
and I'm gonna try to look like Marilyn Monroe, and they try to recreate Marilyn Monroe's outfits and stuff like that. And they try to, like, you can say it's stereotypically female. My response to that is,
I don't see why kids need to be taught this.
Let me ask you a question. Let's say there's a movie that I was going to play in a classroom, and it had a father, and by God, I can't believe this, and a mother, and 2 kids, a dog, and a white picket fence. Straight family, Christian family, right? They go to church every Sunday, and you want to know what? Before their meals, they say grace. Grace, right? That is a stereotypical kind of family in the United States. Do you think if we played a movie in a television, like a show to children, that showed that family, that would be harmful because it's reinforcing stereotypes? I would say no. I would say that's fine to show children.
I would say I mean, you're describing it. The picture you've described is probably different. The way that you made it sounds like if it was like a very clear, like this is a Christian family and this is the good thing. I would say, no, that's actually kind of ideologically pushing a Christian, normative framework, explicitly Christian one. I don't think that should actually be the norm.
I didn't give any moral designation to it. I'm just saying, do you think that that's fine to show to children? Because like a drag show isn't saying this is what you should go do. This is the big good thing to do. Everybody should go be a drag performer.
That's know that's not the case. If the same images and themes and archetypes are presented over and over again, indicates that's normalizing. That's literally what it does.
Yeah, it's normalizing the ability for people to go and present in this art form. But the thing is, when you do a drag performance, you are entering a make-believe world. It's make-believe land. Nobody's sitting there like, wow, that's how they actually. You're entering a play. Basically, you're entering like a performance, and during plays and performances, there are a lot of exaggerations and playing into like stereotypes. And there's going to be people who's like the stereotypical housewife and the stereotypical this, and they're going to play into things we see in society. Because you want to know what? A lot of stereotypes you can see in society.
Okay, like, good. All of that we should allow kids to play, and they should be allowed to play whatever imaginary roles. We do not need drag queens in the premise to facilitate that imagination.
Well, I'm not saying you need drag queens to facilitate imagination.
We don't want.
Wait.
There's no case to be made. You're right. Sorry.
Okay, I'm not saying you need it to engage with people's imagination, but if the idea is that by having drag performances we're going to reinforce sexist stereotypes about women, I find that that's silly, because I do also think that that people can generally tell, definitely when you have parents there, they can easily explain that, oh, this is a drag performance, this is a character. You know, like if somebody came in and like played a pirate, like arg, it's not gonna I don't think that's gonna confuse children too much. Even if he's playing into like a stereotype about pirate or any stereotype, I don't see any harm being done to children, even if they're playing into stereotypes in any way.
Okay. There's a couple ways that could go down. First off, and I. Just to illustrate why I'm saying this, and we can go down this if you want, we can avoid it.
Okay.
Like there are like papers and what would you say? There's
studies?
Academic. Yeah. Well, it's definitely not studies. There are papers talking about the purpose of drag pedagogy. That's what it's called. There's academic weight behind why should we bring drag queens specifically into schools. And their ideology, which I do not believe permeates every instance of drag queen story any more than I believe that every coach who prays in school as a Christian is acting out some sort of Catholic, the Vatican's orders or whatever. But there is a underlying ideology of, well, the reason we want to bring drag in particular is because we teach queer ways of knowing and queer pedagogy. And the idea is, well, we're going to teach kids that we can kind of subvert normal norms, so to speak, subvert whatever the typical the stereotype that you gave, the example, the white heterosexual heteronormative framework and whatnot.
Yes.
And to me,
Andrew's Paradise.
Right. Well, like, and maybe this is a more interesting discussion more broadly, because I think the reason, and you're not making this case, which I'm glad, or, and maybe you will, whatever. The idea is, well, we're bringing these drag queens in because we're trying to teach kids kind of queer ways of knowing, and that they should challenge the heteronormative standards in society. Right. And the argument is then, okay, should we be teaching kids to challenge the heteronormative norms in society? And I would say, no, we should be giving people freedom to deviate from those heteronormative social structures as needed, i.e. gay marriage, which is why I'm in favor of it. But like, there are certain things where it's like you say, oh, well, we want to teach kids to be free and explore their imagination, all that stuff. It's like, well, we want to teach kids math and science and history and yeah, there's some time for art and whatnot, but like the purpose of education is to be able to, give kids the ability to operate in the society that we exist in, not a different society, but a Western society based on individual rights and democracy and whatnot. And the queer ways of knowing, the idea of subverting these heteronormative norms and stuff. It's like when I see the papers being written about it, then I see the extreme examples of it. It's like there's a pattern there. I'm not suggesting that every instance of this is part of that pattern, but in a broad way, it's like it's why conservatives are against it, and it's why I have no problem with conservatives loudly condemning this. That's kind of the main point I'm trying to make. So maybe we can talk about the heteronormativity.
So the thing of it is, like, by having drag performers, you're telling kids that you should challenge heteronormativity, or that
yes,
you're
that's the explicit.
Out. So
yes.
So my first question is, like, when you say challenge heteronormativity, do you mean they're saying you should not be heterosexual? You should not, practice what is traditionally
heteronormativity is
like
heteronormativity,
or are you saying like heteronormativity as in like you should not constrain yourselves by saying this is the heterosexual way to do it, therefore that's the correct way to do it, that's the way you should do it? Because that second thing, I'm completely fine tearing that down, but I don't think we should tell anybody to be gay or tell anybody to be trans or tell anybody.
What are you okay with? Sorry. What are you okay with?
I'm okay with saying that, hey, heteronormativity, this idea that it's okay, this is the correct way to raise a family. This is the correct way to this is who you're supposed to be attracted to.
This is the discussion.
This is how you're supposed to present yourself. That all right. I don't like. But I don't like that, and I'm fine with that fading with time. I am not okay with somebody going in there saying, let me pitch to you being gay for a second. Let me pitch to you why you need to do this, why you need
Good.
that.
All right.
Because
I'm glad we're on the same page there. Okay. Fair enough.
Because drag performers aren't doing that. They're not going saying, you guys should all become drag performers and be trans. Okay. I don't see that.
I don't see it either. Doesn't mean it's not happening. Just kidding. Okay, let's move this discussion, with Andrew's permission, into this heteronormative idea. Because the reason that Drag Queen Story Hour is salient to begin with is because of this fundamental issue of challenging heteronormativity.
I think,
is that fair?
Yeah. Well, not only is it fair, but it's kind of the natural progression of the consequence of whether or not, within your guys' purview and worldview frameworks, think that this is even okay. So I think that that's a fair place to take it. Do you have any objections with that, Dylan?
Not really. As long as we keep it connected to drag queen.
Yeah, I agree.
It doesn't like.
I mean, it's going to be connected.
Listen, I'll keep it connected. I promise. So far, you guys really haven't delineated too much, so I haven't had to step in much, which is always good. That's Paul for you. He's good faith. So go ahead, Paul.
Yes. Good faith, but not enough faith to be an Eastern Orthodox shill like Andrew and his Eastern Orthodox posse. That's fine. Listen. The reason this is connected to Drag Queen Story Hour is what you said. You said you're okay with challenging the heteronormative norms. Maybe I feel like I'm repeating normative norms, but whatever.
I'm generally fine with that, with people challenging that.
Here is why, and this is why I think many conservatives and many people in general have a strong intuition against Drag Queen Story Hour, and why this issue has created controversy to begin with. Because if it was really as simple as you and I are making it out to be, then there wouldn't be all this controversy associated with it. It's inflamed. It's a battle of ideology. It's not just this one instance. It's grounded in a bigger cultural battle. And so when it comes to heteronormative, I do think that, for example, the reason that I am in favor of gay marriage is because I believe that marriage and monogamy and monogamous nuclear families are necessary for stable societies. Do you agree with that, or do you disagree?
That monogamous are good for stable society.
That in order for a society to be stable, the normative family structure must be is best construed as a two-parent intact household, an intact two-parent household.
An intact two-parent household.
Monogamous.
I do think it is definitely time tested as a proven thing to help bring about like economic stability. I do think it's something that should be encouraged. Now, let me be clear. I think it should be encouraged for there to be two people in the household. I don't necessarily think that has to be a man and a woman, but I agree. I agree.
That's why I said
there has to be structure, because the family, allows more protection for the children when there's two, more income, more parental guidance.
Right. I agree. Yes, that's why I am in favor of gay marriage. The issue of, so this is my problem with drag queens, that let's say drag pedagogy more broadly, is unless what we should be teaching children is that it's okay to be gay, and that there are people that are gay. Obviously, we should wait, because anything having to do with sexual identity and sexual orientation should wait until, I don't know, 12 or 13 or something like that, puberty, or before that. Definitely not like in 3rd and 4th grade and all that. But we should be encouraging people, broadly speaking, to participate in a monogamous society, right? I mean, do you disagree with that? That's vague. I mean, like, unless you have good reason not to, which there are good reasons not to. You should should be taught, like, hey, you should probably
I see where this
pursue a monogamous relationship.
I see where this is going. Let me just skip to the end conclusion. Do you think it's impossible?
Okay.
What about being a drag queen means you can't be in a monogamous relationship?
It's the drag queen pedagogical explicit goal of trying to teach kids to challenge heteronormative structures.
Okay, so I'm going to be honest.
The explicit.
I have no fucking clue what I don't know what that means.
Good. This is why I didn't bring it up in the beginning, because I felt this was too in the weeds. But this is the crux of the issue. Let
me just be clear.
Okay.
I am not endorsing drag queens going to people and encouraging them to not get married and be single and get cat, right? That's not what I'm encouraging. That's also not what's happening, right?
But that is the stated goal of, like, gender scholars. Just like you point out the stated goal of I can well, we're not going to go over the art. Well, I can send you the article, but this is
I could easily just
online debate, and people say that all the time.
The stated goals of anti-drag queen story hour is to stop transitioning and stop I could, like, say the stated goal of this person, but, like, okay, that's their goal, but that's not the goal of the vast majority of drag queens. The drag queens that I meet and the ones that have participated, that I've talked to in these types of programs, when I talk to them, they don't talk to me about queer theory. They talk about, I love to read these books to kids. I love it's so much fun.
Okay,
they have such a great time. That's the real conversation happen. I remember I had this kind of a conversation similar with this about Short Fat Otaku, when he says the reason why there's such a low marriage rate in the gay community is because of the queer theory. I feel like that's being a little terminally online. Like, it's not the queer theory that's caused that. I think it's a lot of things that cause it. I think the fact that marriage rates are generally downtrending. I think it has to do with the fact that gay people haven't had marriage rights until like 7 years ago. So it's like, it's going to be a weird cultural adjustment. It's still lingering homophobia.
Okay.
There's a bunch of other reasons that cause it. So
I think it's partially due to the fact that queer theory posits that marriage is an inherently patriarchal institution and should be resisted.
How high of a percentage do you think that there's queer people holding back from getting married because they have read queer theory and it told them that marriage is, like, bad?
You don't need to
be resisted.
You do not need to read queer theory to act out its tenets any more than you need to read the Bible to act out Christian ideology.
So how do you think queer people, like,
I think queer theory has absolutely dominates the universities, indisputably. Even something like well, that's a bad example, but, like, and this is the issue. This is why it's so difficult to be an enlightened centrist, because on the one hand, I want to there are transgender people and there are gay people who want to get married. That's why I'm in favor of gay marriage. And on the one hand, that's why it's important to fight for that. But on the other hand, there's also the other element of, and people like Vosh have said this in his terms. It's like, what did he say? It's like, there are extreme elements of the queer community or extreme elements of like the far left, whatever, who use queer coded language to, make their point or whatever. And it's like, to me, I don't think it's controversial at all to say that over the past few years, given the rates of like increase in terms of non-binary and all of these different identities, some of that's legitimate and some of that is, a positive consequence of being more inclusive. But a significant amount of that is overwhelmingly likely social contagion. And the problem with drag pedagogy is coming in and then saying, okay, this is normalizing. What's that?
I'm going to ask you to substantiate that the majority of the recent increase in like trans people and, more queer identifying people is just social contagion and not, say, the normalization of norms. Because an example that's always brought up, this is like the meme.
The left-handedness
one? The left-handedness. Like, the left-handedness in the 1920s was like 2%, and as it was normalized slowly, it went all the way up to 12%.
What did it normalize to?
It went to about 12%.
Do you know what the percentage of Gen Z identifying as LGBTQ is?
Probably
I don't know. Let's look it up.
Probably higher than 12%. But that's also because that's more than just being left-handed. It's the majority of the new wave. I think a lot of people think it's trans people. It's not. It's actually bisexuals. There's a lot of people who are finding out they don't only find women attractive, but if the man has long enough hair and he's curvy enough, if you tilt your head a certain way, they'll a lot of men are finding that out about themselves. A lot of women
I have to admit, and your audience might know this, I recently came out on my channel as non-binary. Okay. And so I technically am a member of the LGBTQ IA2Q STI Play Plus community. Now, I did it because it's my living self. But I can very easily... Do you think that there are any people who identify as non-binary who aren't really non-binary or don't really mean anything when they're saying that?
Yeah, I've met a few.
Okay.
Like you and Destiny.
If you had to guess, this is an honest. What do you mean? What?
You and Destiny, probably.
Me? Are you serious?
Yeah, I mean, you said it a little sarcastically. It felt like it. Yeah.
Well, whoa! I'm gonna need a peer-reviewed study to indicate that I said that sarcastically. Otherwise, you can't substantiate that.
So
just kidding.
So okay.
I know, but okay, I know. But my point, because you said I need you to substantiate, why I'm saying, well, some of this is social contagion. But you and I agree.
No, you said it felt like you were indicating the majority of it was social contagion.
Well, that's obviously there's no possible way to prove or disprove exactly what percentage of it is. But would you agree that at least a substantial minority of it, let's not say majority, but a substantial minority of the Gen Z people identifying as LGBT plus, LGBTQ, whatever the term is now, is probably like, this doesn't really mean anything. And this is probably the result of social trends and all that.
I think it's only been 7 years since we've had gay marriage in this country. It's very hard for me to say this early on after legalization of gay marriage, and we'll still see in states trying to there's still
I don't think gay marriage has anything to do with it.
Well, when it comes to the escalation of LGBTQ plus people,
yeah,
the amount of people, I think 100% the normalization. Social media. Yeah, no, okay, you got to let me finish.
Sorry, you're right.
I think the normalization of queer people, especially spiked around the gay marriage ruling. It was around 2015, 2014 that the majority of Americans started to have more positive views of queer people, right? That's the majority of Americans.
And since then,
it's now about 66% to 70% of Americans are favoring gay marriage. That means there's still 30%, 1 in 3 people. I wonder which of the 1 in 3 people in this room are probably.
Yeah, what an interesting little
1 in 3 people
sample experiment.
One in 3 people are still not in favor of that. And so as those people slowly, and this is a very blunt way to put it, like die off or change their mind or, something happens, then the number continues to go up. That is the bluntest way to put it. And so I think it's very hard for me to say so soon after we've seen this spike in queer acceptance. When I was a kid, I actually was homophobic. I was a homophobic child. And so we've seen like a change. I was a base child, Andrew. We've seen this change.
I mean, that's what I heard. All I heard was I was based when I was younger. That's all I heard.
When I was, so I think it's hard to say that so soon after we've seen just the majority of Americans, not even like 80 to 90%, but just like 50 to 60% of Americans now being more accepting of this. Now we're saying, now it's just because people are doing it for trendy reasons. That's a significant portion. I think that there is a portion of it that are people trying to discover themselves and then be like, oh, I guess that wasn't me, and then they'll go on. And I think that's a natural part of growing up. And I think that's especially for young people, that's a natural part of growing up, is finding out and discovering who you are. And I think that's also pretty natural. And for me, it's like, it's not, I doubt somebody's going to stay gay for 50 or 60 or 70 years, or stay trans for 60, 70 years and die trans when they weren't trans, even though their body's like telling them like, I'm not attracted to the person I'm with, I have no interest in the person I'm with. And unless there was some like outside fear factor.
People stay in marriages for 50 years like that. Straight marriages are like that. But yes, I get your point.
But I think that rate is going to be tremendously low because there's literal natural, like there's natural factors pulling you in the other direction, your attraction to the opposite sex.
Okay. Yes. First off, I apologize for interrupting so much. I have noticed I've done that, so I'll try not to. So I agree. After gay marriage, rates of acceptance went up, and it is a majority now. However,
but there's still a significant minority of people who don't like gay people, don't like trans people, and even the people who are okay with them. There's a difference between being okay with them and then finding out it's your kid. That is very different.
Sure, I don't dispute that. There's a small minority of people who hate every other minority that that person that isn't them. So I agree. But my issue, again, going back to the challenging heteronormativity and the consequences of that, are I agree. I cannot honestly, of course, it's the majority of kids who identify as LGBTQ+ are doing so for social. I can't do that. But you and I both know, and everyone watching this knows, that there are people who are doing it for trendy reasons. And I don't think that's a consequence of gay marriage. Funny enough, that's actually the argument Andrew makes, which is Andrew says, well, we shouldn't have legalized gay marriage because now it's led to all this other stuff. My point is, gay marriage has nothing to do with it, because the people pushing queer pedagogy or queer ways of knowing. I agree that Andrew's
wrong about everything. I mean, that's self-evident.
Not everything. You're wrong about half the time. Andrew's wrong about half the time, and I'm wrong none of the time. Ha! Damn it! Oh, I set you up for that. Anyway, that's fine. Listen. I think it's the point. I agree. Yeah, gay marriage. That's one thing. But you agree that part of the reason that there are people identifying as LGBT when they're not actually is because of factors outside of gay marriage. Social media, I would assume, is a number one, right? We could agree on that.
I think that there are. I think young people ask questions about themselves as they develop and they start to discover themselves. I also don't particularly think that's harmful.
But it can be if for example, and it certainly can be if those children go on like puberty blockers. I can tell you.
Well, yeah, but and
it turns out not to be. We're not actually trans.
I can give you my own experience
Sure.
with the different one. So I thought I was straight. Then I found that I was, attracted to men. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm probably fucking gay. So I said I was gay. Then I was like, well, but I'm still also kind of attracted to women, because the idea, it was like, you're gay or you're not gay. That was like the idea of how it was growing up. And then as I discovered myself more, I found out, okay, I'm probably just bisexual. I probably just like both men and women. And that type of discoverability of finding out who myself was, even if social media was like, oh, you're probably a homo, Dylan, or something like that. Like, I just naturally discovered myself. And I think that's what the vast majority of these cases are going to be. And when we're talking about something like puberty blockers and then eventually sexual transition, this is something that has to be done with parental approval. This is something that has to be done after going through multiple doctors. And so it's very hard for me to think that like tweets are going to be enough or social media is going to be enough to hold that person adamant all the way till the transition and through it, that like this was the right way to go until they have sexual like reassignment surgery. And I think like with any surgery, with any type of medical treatment, there's going to be examples where they went through with a medical treatment and it ended up not being the correct medical treatment that was necessary. And that's definitely very sad. But the rates of this are also tremendously low.
Okay. And this is and I agree. And I brought the point up, so it's not your fault. It's my fault for getting into this, because this is a separate debate about, all the metrics in terms of all this and whatnot. Yep. Out of curiosity, do you think we should put all children on puberty blockers until they can make decisions about their own gender?
Of course. I also think we should make every kid gay.
Okay, I'm glad there are people that actually make that case. Do you agree that that's absolute nonsense?
That is my ultimate goal, but I'm not allowed to say it.
Okay, I'm assuming I saw someone, because I watched one of the panels you had a while ago, and someone said that on your panel. We should put all kids on puberty blockers until they can make their own decision.
I think we should only do it to kids in red states, to be clear.
Okay, all right. You're not condemning it explicitly, which is fine. I read your sarcasm.
I don't. No, I think that. No, I think it's silly. I think the idea
Okay.
to put every child on puberty blocker is fucking ridiculous.
Okay.
It's like it. But I don't think anybody at IRL who's been outside of their basement for the last 5 years.
I agree. Thank you. All right. Yes. Fair enough. Okay. I guess I don't. I'm glad we're on the same page in that regard.
So hang on. This is a good time.
Yeah.
For us to wind this down, move into closing statements before we move over to callers. Before we do that, there was one thing that I did want to clarify, which is Dylan, this is for both you and your audience's sake, even though I would think that you would know it. By the left standard, by every metric possible, it is true that I am homophobic and transphobic, at least by your guys' metrics, but I'm not a racialist.
Okay. Did I call you racist at some point?
Yeah. Well, you did like
I wasn't being serious.
Yeah, point to that direction. It's like I'm honest to a fault, or at least I try to be. So yes, by your guys' metrics, absolutely on the first two, but on the third, nah. Nope. Nope.
Okay.
That would conflict.
Okay. I don't think you're a racist, Andrew. I think I was mostly just fucking with you.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to
Kumbaya.
To let it be known.
Centrism
I understand.
brings people
I understand. You would only call RuPaul the F slur, not the N word. I understand.
That's true. That's true. But anyway,
Dylan, real quick, one of my buddies texted me. I think he's a regular fan of yours, and he just saw me on your show, and he was very surprised. So, what's up, Parker?
Hello, Parker.
I have friends across the entire. We've got the Eastern Orthodox posse breaking bread with the.
Why is there so many Eastern Orthodox people in America? Where the fuck do they come from? Like, I understand if you're Greek, right? But I'm seeing like a lot of people who are their background's Irish. It's like, where did this come from? Where did this?
Me? You mean me?
Are you Eastern Orthodox?
Should I stereotypically?
You didn't know that?
Should I stereotypically be a Catholic because I'm Irish? You fucking stereotypical piece of shit.
Yes.
Is that what I should be?
Yes.
No, you should.
Yes. He says yes. That's kind of funny. All right, gentlemen. I want to wind this down into closing statements. Paul, you have to close first. We're going to give Dylan the last word before we move into calls. Gentlemen, go ahead.
I should technically get the last word, but I don't actually mind because I gave the first one. I don't have to give a closing statement. I get to give.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. You know what? You're right, Paul. I fucked that up. Dylan,
I'm okay with it.
It's actually your first close. No, shut up, Paul. It's your first close, then Paul gets the last word. Go ahead, Dylan.
Bringing that up.
So I view drag just like any other art form, that there's going to be versions of it that are age appropriate for young people and versions of it that are not age appropriate for young people. I think a lot of this, like the majority of this discussion has been dominated by the idea of like drag queen story hour going to schools. But I also do want to emphasize again that I'm pretty sure, I might be wrong, that the drag queen story hour dynamic, the system is that they find local libraries and then parents of their own free will take their children to these events where they'll then have a drag queen story hour performance. And that this isn't something where drag queen story hour is being forced upon everyone, where your children has to go to drag queen story hour or it's going to fail, and then your kid's going to be failed out of public school and now they can't get a job and now they're depressed and now they're going to throw themselves in front of a train because they didn't go to drag queen story hour. That's not happening, right? Really what's happening right now is a lot of backlash towards drag queen story hour for just making this option available for parents who want to bring their kids to these events, which are, by the way, always supervised by these parents. The vast majority of parents that I've talked to who have brought their kids to these performances said that nothing inappropriate happened, that it was very lovely experiences. The actors that I've talked to, performers that I've talked to, are very lovely people who care a lot about children, care a lot about children's issues. It would never harm a child or try to introduce them to anything sexual. And I just think it's like any other art form. But the fact that it's a queer art form, because it derives, or it's a very queer dominated art form at the very least, and it derives from the queer community, I think makes a lot of people assume that it's inherently sexual because queerness, a big part of queerness is obviously sexuality, but that isn't necessarily the case. As I would say, Dragula proves, as I would say many other types of drag that exist not only in the United States but around the world proves, Miss Doubtfire, you could maybe say proves. And I think that it really is just a question of parents being responsible and knowing what performances they're bringing their children to, doing research beforehand, and making sure that organizations that advertise such performances are honest in the advertising of it, and that they are, being as clear and communicative with parents as possible.
Appreciate that closing statement, Dylan. Go ahead, Paul, when you're ready.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for the conversation, Dylan. I enjoyed it. Part of the reason I'm interested in even talking about this is because we are in a very bad time in society, and we're very divided. And the fact that we can have a conversation up here about a controversial topic and, approach it honestly and also have fun and recognize we disagree. It's like, I agree that, people who, drag is associated with gay and gay is bad, therefore get it out of my schools. Like, that's wrong. Okay. But I also recognize that there's those weird instances of, children being involved in drag, and parents have a problem with that. And from my perspective, it's just like, again, what is the reason to bring drag queens in versus any other LGBTQ inclusive curriculum, right? And Dylan, you said you're not necessarily, you don't have to make the argument that it's positive. It's morally neutral argument. It's like, okay, if it's morally neutral, then just say no, and that's not a problem. And if it's morally neutral, then people saying no to it shouldn't be treated as if they're terrible people. And so I think there are bigger issues to worry about. And Dylan, clearly by his perspective on not wanting to put all children on puberty blockers and not wanting to abolish marriage as an institution, the idea that Dylan is some far left ideologue, it's like, I think that's nonsense. You've proven that that's not the case. And so, to put you in the same category as people who would actually advocate for, we want drag queens in because we want to dismantle heteronormativity and, all sexuality is socially constructed anyway, and all that nonsense. And so I'm glad we could have this conversation. And I hope we can work towards a productive future, because things are rapidly falling apart around us.
I appreciate that you guys had this conversation right here on the Crucible, and welcome back, Dylan Burns, your second time. Appreciate having you on for this topic. I know that you've been on kind of that Russia-Ukraine tear, but sometimes it's maybe good to deviate just a little bit, because these are still primary social issues, and they're not going to go away anytime soon.
Look, Andrew, I promise you I will never stop until we host a drag queen story hour in the Kremlin.
You? Yes,
and I will never stop until we host a drag queen story hour in the Kremlin.
Isn't the Kremlin an Orthodox church?
It's not going to happen and stuff, but fair enough. I just wanted to make sure that I would correct it's like, at least get the biases and the bigotry correct. And I can't, and I still give everyone a fair debate. You see how fucking benevolent I am, Dylan? Do you see how benevolent I am?
Andrew's the real centrist. Amen. Thank you, Andrew. Your enlightened centrism reigns upon us all.
You guys and your fucking nonsense. Anyway, make sure everybody out there do all the things you're supposed to do to pop that algorithm up. Make sure that you like, subscribe, share, blah, blah, blah. And send in the super chats. And by the way, the call lines are now open. We're going to get to our first caller. Anchor, can you hear us okay? Anchor? Can you hear us?
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
We can. Go ahead, sir.
Excellent. Hey, Dylan, what's up? It's been a minute. So I feel like I'm glad Dylan still has a sense of humor. And I'm sorry, I was kind of still laughing whenever I came off mute. But so I guess the argument is drag sexual, but the drag queen story hour. And I might have missed this, tuned in pretty late, but it's not men who happen to be men that are drag queens that want to read to children. It's men who want to be in drag in front of children reading stories, correct? Like that's the the thing. So why do men want to do drag in front of children? If this was a benevolent thing, I would expect that they would just want to read to children, not necessarily be in drag. So
I think there's two reasons. I think one reason is like people like to enjoy their work, right? Like I enjoy my work, and even though I work with
who
kids,
has
well,
why
I mean,
what no, you're not going to be able to say
Caller,
like, this is
caller,
not
give him a chance to
profession.
respond. Caller, give him a chance to respond.
I think it's part like people like to enjoy their work, and so if they can combine an art form that they care a lot about with their desire to read and work with children in a way that's non-harmful, then there's no problem with it. But also drag
It is harmful.
can be I disagree, but I think I think a lot of it also is like drag, as I've said, is extremely colorful art form, extremely flamboyant, extremely vocal, extremely these are things like if you know like how children like eat up things like cocoa melon and stuff like that.
I'm
That is
I'm
like
more
great.
familiar with children than you are.
Okay, I don't know why you're being so
I
sorry.
I hope you're a
To answer your
parent.
question.
Yes, I have
Okay,
children.
all
So
right,
yes,
phew.
I'm very, very aware of how their mind absorbs
Okay,
things.
well, okay, then I guess I'm talking to all the people in chat who don't have children. But a lot of these kids like eat up cocomelon and like these flashing colors. But this thing is
Yes.
like brain poison. It's brain poison for them. It's muck. This like YouTube, how it'll just like serve them a video of these
Drag queens are
stuff.
better.
But yeah, I do think they're better. I think that having people read books to children, and like developing reading skills at a young age is important. And I think if they can
So
do it
you
in a
think
fun,
the
performative
queering
way,
of
then it's
children
fine.
is offset by the benefits of whatever the marginal
what do you mean the
increase
queering?
of reading?
What do you mean the queering of children?
I mean, it exactly as it is in leftist ideology from 50 years ago, like the whole heteronormative queering of the heteronormative status quo, like all that junk.
So when I
It's literally
drag
the queering of
performers,
children offsets. That is offset by the benefit in marginal increase in exposure to books. Is what you're saying.
it's not the marginal increase in exposure to books alone.
It is
It's also,
exactly a marginal increase in exposure to books.
It's not just the marginal increase in exposure to books. It's also that the children enjoy it. The reason why drag queens
they would
story
enjoy
hour,
being outside running in circles.
You gotta let them respond, caller.
They
let
enjoy
them
it.
respond to what you ask.
The reason
Okay.
why drag queen story hour is still running is because kids keep wanting to go back because they enjoy interacting with the performers the same way that somebody enjoys interacting with like Gaston at Disney World. It's interesting to see these bizarre characters reading books to you and interacting with you in a way and having fun, and it's flamboyant and it's like flashy colors because drag is very flashy. And the idea that it's queering children, like I don't think that your kid is going to be made queer or gay by seeing a drag performance, but if they interact with queer and gay people and they happen to be queer or gay in some way, then I think that might, and later in their life, make them accept themselves more through like positive representation. But I don't think it's making anybody queer.
So, like, is the green light on?
I what? I don't know what that means.
Well, I don't want to interrupt you.
I finished.
No, you can go ahead, man.
Well, my child absolutely is not going to drag queen story hour, but I mean that's what it is, though, and yeah, I mean,
I won't force your kid to go. It's your free will, man. You raising your own kid is your kid, not mine.
And Car, did you have anything you wanted to end on here?
No, not really. Just kind of was a happenstance thing. I figured I'd hop in here and see if it was covered in, good stuff.
Appreciate it very much, man. Have a great night. Will, you're up. Can you hear us, Will?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, got a question for Paul. It's kind of weird. So, Paul, I guess imagine like the one of like the instances that you're like objecting to, right, with respect to Drag Queen Story Hour. Like, I guess picture like just their overall like presence or like just their overall description, correct? But instead of being like a man, right, they're a cis woman. Would you still have the same hiccups?
Yeah. It'd be like, that's why I gave the example of Hooters. Hooters is like cis women, having accentuated sexual features, just like drag is accentuated sexual features. And Dylan made the case, well, there are instances of drag where that's not the case. And it's like, that's where it just becomes a semantic thing. But okay, yeah, sure.
But that's not really like drag. You're not having a problem with the drag queen, right? You're just having a problem with like
the
overall
sexualized aspect to it.
Yes, but like that's not inherent to drag. That's all like sometimes teachers have like these same exact uniforms, right? So
all I can say is any drag show that is not sexual is a bad drag show, I think, by definition. And every actual person who's ever gone to a drag show will tell you that's the case.
How many drag shows have you been to?
Admittedly, only one.
Okay.
But hold on, I'm right, aren't I?
No, I don't think you're right, because I just talked, like I talked to
Really?
you in this conversation about Dragula, for example, right? This is a horror-based drag show. Dude, like I think a lot of people can have just a great time getting terrified by drag performers. Drag performers are really good with expressions, really good
just
at
because
like,
it's
getting
horror
character.
doesn't exclude that it could also be sexual.
I mean,
And
it
if there's
could,
still
but it
accentuated
can be,
sexual features, it's still drag.
Wait, accentuated sexual features. I mean, like when we're talking about here, it seems to just be like the boobs, right? Like if they have big boobs, that's sexual.
I mean, that's the obvious one to point out without having to show a picture. And when I did show the picture, I think everybody knew. Okay, that's exactly what he's talking about.
Do you think it would be bad for like a teacher with big boobs to teach a classroom?
It depends on how covered. I would hope there would be a dress code in place.
So as long as she covers up basically and like doesn't like show off her breasts and is, like, doing that,
hold on,
fine.
a woman. This is exactly the Friday night conversations I love to have. A woman with big breasts is not made. Her womanhood is not determined by her sexual features per se. There's many aspects to drag. Is a narrow performance art that focuses on the accentuation of drag.
I mean, but it doesn't hurt, right, Paul?
Well, the thing is, like a lot.
As a moral man,
I've seen a lot of Japanese drag performers
degeneracy
who do not work with like
to off-screen.
Do not work with gigantic breasts. It's like the most basic of padding possible.
I know. I'm just giving that as the example again. It's like RuPaul's Drag Race. It's like, is every drag racer on RuPaul's Drag Race not sexual?
Sexual?
No, but most.
The problem you're having, like the fact that the drag queens can choose not to have like massive breasts, but choose to do so just for like the shock value or something. That's your problem. Whereas,
my problem is I do not believe you can find me one instance of a drag queen who is anyone in drag that is not in some form or fashion accentuating sexual characteristics. That does not exist. And if you find one, that's a clown.
Can I ask you a question? When you say accentuating sexual characteristics, red lipstick accentuates sexual characteristics. So does like blush and certain forms of makeup. Would you say that
Jordan Peterson? Whoa, geez, that's very controversial what you just said there. Okay, should women not wear makeup in the workplace?
Yeah, I'm about to ask you, like, do you think women should not be able to wear makeup in the workplace? I think they should be allowed to if they want to. Same thing with school.
They're adults.
I think but if they're teachers working with children and they're wearing red lipstick.
If a teacher came in looking like Marilyn Monroe and had red lipstick on, I'd be like, you know what? That's kind of weird. Okay. My eyebrows would raise down.
I want to bring it back to the specific, like just wearing red lipstick. Red lipstick if we're using the definition, well, why is it now that it depends on the situation? But when it
are there instances? Can you wear red? Is it possible to wear red makeup without it being sexual? Yes, but the point you made is that red lipstick generally is sexual. And so my point generally, if I saw someone who was wearing red lipstick in a sexual manner, I'd be like, that's kind of weird. Just like if I saw a library having Hooters cater their food, I'd be like.
But the thing is, these drag performers aren't doing it in a sexual manner. They're not like, they're not doing that. Like they're just reading a book.
There's some instances where that's the case, or some instances where that's explicitly what they're doing.
Actually,
how do you know? How do you know?
Because I've
guys, let's bring it back to the caller real quick. The caller's still here.
Yeah,
caller, do you have a last follow-up?
Seeing Paul, like it seems like you're more hung up with the choices made by like the individual drag performance instead of like the overall like inherent aspect of the gender bending like performance, right? So if like a drag performer like puts on moderately sized breasts, right, puts on like moderate to hair, you'd be okay with it. You'd be a-okay. Just
I think
it's like a regular woman doing storytelling hour.
If Ron DeSantis passes a law, it should be any drag queen wearing A through C cup is fine, but D through F cup is,
Yeah, it's.
I don't know. I mean, it's just like
I'm fine with that.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, caller. Appreciate the call in. And now it appears that BPF himself, the man, the legend, is going to call in. BPF, go ahead.
How you doing? My question's for Paul. You degen. Now, I want to get this correct. That you support gay marriage. Is that correct?
I think so.
And don't give me a wise ass fucking response. Just answer the fucking question.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, are you okay teaching gay marriage to children?
How old are the children?
Let's, for the sake of argument, we can say the children are 8 years old or younger. Jesus fucking Christ.
I don't know. Whenever we teach kids about, I don't know. I don't think I was ever taught about marriage. I don't think we have to explicitly teach about gay marriage. I think we can just say, oh, well, people get married and some of them are gay.
Okay.
We don't have to make a big deal about it.
Well, here's the thing. We do things a little bit differently here on the Crucible. It occurs to me, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, is that if you're teaching children about homosexual marriage, you're actually grooming them about homosexuality. I don't really see a way out of this.
I don't see a way into it.
Fuck you.
Yeah. Sounds like Andrew, all right. You're muted.
Yeah, I was gonna say BPF. Unfortunately, he had to cut his call short. He became belligerent and began to use a bunch of pejoratives like that. It was very cruel, very mean.
Yeah, we know the real BPF.
That guy's a real fucking cocksucker, All right, let's get into the super chats, guys. Let's see, where are we gonna start here? I'll start with Dono chat. Bear with me. Sorry.
Dono arigato.
What?
Dono arigato, Mr. Roboto.
Also, for my chat, for the record, you can also give me money. I won't read your question, but you can still give me money.
I am a. I don't have any way to give me money, so I'll just.
Okay, so the first one starts with Run Mouth for $5. He says, question for both participants.
Immoral.
Do you think that
morally
widespread
corrupt,
acceptance
bankrupt
of
man.
drag culture would eventually lead to educating school children on this topic? What grade or age would be acceptable?
Probably. I mean, it would be like any other art form. It would probably be in some like arts class, And I mean, like they would probably. I mean, it depends on like what aspects you teach of it. Like certain history classes for younger people are like more appropriate for younger students because they don't get into too much of the really nitty gritty kind of just like gross details of some pretty brutal parts of history. So I would assume like the more sexual parts of it that could probably be taught at like higher age levels, like 15, 16, stuff like that. But like just the most basic like artistic like aspects of it could be taught at like younger ages. It'd probably be in some like electives arts class or something like that if it was taught in schools.
Paul?
I mean, if something gets normalized to a certain degree and then it becomes part of the culture, then are we obligated to educate children about it? I don't know. It seems like, it just seems unnecessary. I want inclusive LGBT inclusive education. That doesn't have to be drag. That's a specific thing that seems unnecessary, in my opinion.
Well, I think like it's just the artistic part of the community, right? That's why queer people care about it, is because
I don't think all gay people believe that drag represents them.
Well, I mean, it doesn't need to represent them as an individual, but I don't think there's like a local type of hip hop out of DC that I don't necessarily think like represents me, but that doesn't mean that stuff couldn't still be taught to like the local community because it's like a part of our local culture, part of our local heritage.
Yeah, but if it was taught as if drag is representative of the LGBTQ community, it's kind of like, well, wait a second.
Well,
That
you don't
doesn't
need to
make
say it's
sense 'cause there's
representative of
plenty
all
of individuals,
people, but it derived from
or even
it.
most.
It came from
Well,
it, though.
sure.
It's like if I
Okay,
talk
that's-
about like if I talk about
That's
jazz,
very different
it's
from saying it
impossible.
represents those people.
It's impossible for me to talk about jazz without saying that it came out of black artists in the black community that expanded to cover a lot of
It's not
other.
impossible. I believe that was how it was talked about for like 40 years.
Jazz? What do you mean? I don't understand.
Wasn't that the whole thing? Is jazz was stolen from the black community, and they specifically didn't talk about that?
Yeah, then there's Jimi Hendrix, rock and roll, like, but that doesn't mean that rock and roll or jazz.
But that's like saying, but that's like saying, well, in order to teach about black history or black culture, which again, I don't even think that's a nebulous term. It's like we're going to teach about jazz because jazz represents the culture.
100%. If you wanted to teach about black culture in the United States, teaching about jazz music and like different types of music forms and like the influence the black community has on music would 100% be part of that. Like if I was to teach you about like Arabic culture, I would have to like go into like the details of, like local music and local art forms. That doesn't mean every single Arab person is like, I love like
that's my point.
The like shaking guitar that you hear when you look at like the pyramids or whatever.
Sure, if by black, yes, okay. And my point is, it's a nebulous term, but yes, black culture to the degree that we all kind of know what we're talking about when we say black culture. It's like, yes, there's jazz and all that and stuff. But again, it's still just like it's like saying. I don't know, it goes back to the Colin Kaepernick thing where it's like, well, to be black or what is it? Black people that assimilate into white values are, denying their blackness or something like that. It's like, what kind of bullshit is that? As soon as you start talking about black culture, you start essentializing and stuff. And it's just like, not as soon as that. I think that's a danger of talking about it in that way. I think people can use black culture or black community as shorthand. But as soon as we get into like, well, this is actually representative of this, if I
said
apart.
sushi came from Japanese culture, right? Like no one would have a problem with that because of course it did. Like, but that doesn't mean every Japanese person likes sushi.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
Hey, $3 from Run Mouth. He says, Dylan, when you say interact with drag queens, I can't read the rest of that.
Yep, I could feel it come from a mile away.
Yeah.
Yep.
$7 from Not Wally. He says, this debate was a drag. Wow. So, I don't know. The dad jokes, I guess, have to keep coming. We're going to get into we're going to get into the rest of these. Oh, come on. That was funny, Dylan.
It was. I gave a slight chuckle.
Yeah, that's all it's worth. They're dad jokes, Wicked Wally sends in a $5 super chat. He says, keep the kids away from the stove. Coming up next, we've got some Young and Burns. That's directly making fun of Paul for people who've been around long enough to make fun of Paul. Johnny Cash sends in
making fun of their beliefs, but
Johnny Cash sends in $1.99 and says, "Who is Magnus Hirschfield?" Blitzkrieg Bear sent in a $5 super chat and says, "How much smut does Dylan watch?" The entire chat is wondering. Allegedly.
I'd rather not discuss that.
This entire channel is smut, so everyone can just calm the fuck down.
Big Cheese, we appreciate your ongoing membership. Abaddon, we also appreciate your membership. Much appreciated. Alan Wiggs sends in a $5.89 super chat and says, "What I don't get about drag is that it's men dressing up as women and singing, performing. Why not just perform or sing as a man?"
I think there's certain like aspects, like as a man, like there's certain like cult like items and like gender stuff that most men don't do. Like when it comes to like extremely long and puffy hair and the performative colors and the big dresses. And I like performing as a drag performer like gives you an easier means to like touch that. Not to mention if you wanted to like perform a feminine role, as often happened in kabuki theater, you would have to like play a female character. And so that's what drag performers are. They're playing a female character, just like they did in kabuki theater.
Gotcha. Ortho Eric sends in $5, says, "PF, why is Drag Story Hour bad outside of just your preference?"
Oh, my God. These presuppositionalists, man, need to get a fucking life. This is unreal. Why is it bad outside, or is it? It is just my preference. Just like when
it's not a fucking answer. It's not an answer. It's not a fucking answer.
I will throw acid in your face, and then I'll go, "Well, why is that bad?" Except for your preference. It's like it's over. Stop living your NPC dialogue. It's ridiculous. Listen, if Jay Dyer wants to have an honest conversation and explain to me what I'm missing here, I'm not a debate because I'm clearly an idiot. But if someone wants if the king of presupposition wants to just explain and just answer my questions as honestly as possible, that's fine. But otherwise, it's just you can't come into a debate unless you believe presupposition.
Okay. You could have just said set up a debate with Jay Dyer, and I would have just said
no.
yes.
It's not a debate.
I would have just said yes.
Conversation. Because he's going to go, well, actually, the fact that you're in a debate proves that I'm winning. This is how you do debate. It's like, okay, well, then let's just have a conversation where I'm just honestly asking you what you believe. But it won't go to that because we're in a debate. It's like, this is why all I do is I just come here. I know Dylan thinks one way. I think a different way. And I just try to explain what I think and understand what he thinks. That's how I debate. That's it. And it may be a terrible strategy. But it's my strategy.
Can I ask you something?
Please do.
Because I think Andrew's out of questions, and I'm going to give him some more airtime. When it comes to the you made the comment like why such the reaction to the people who are saying no to Drag Queen Story Hour if it's morally neutral. Now
right.
I don't think it's morally neutral, but I don't need to prove that it's positive. But let's for a moment like move past that. And I just wanted to say that whether or not it's whether or not they don't like it is not really the issue, because like if they don't like it, they can just not bring their kids to Drag Queen Story Hour, right? Like I don't like I would be probably uncomfortable. Let's say I had a 12-year-old who was really scared of scary movies. And if for whatever reason I didn't bring him to scary movies, then I wouldn't bring him to a scary movie, right? For whatever reason you would ever have for not bringing your kids to Drag Queen Story Hour, that's your choice. The problem is, and I think this is the real bad reaction to people saying no, is it doesn't seem to be people saying no to my kids doing this because they could just not bring their kids to Drag Queen Story Hour. It seems to be anytime Drag Queen Story Hour goes into a community or goes into an area, there seems to be a vitriolic reaction of trying to stop them from performing in those places.
Well, it's like tragedy of the commons type thing. It's like, well, it's like if ideally it would be better off if we had LGBT inclusive education that didn't involve drag performers coming in. And your point is, well, if they want to come in, why can't we let some people go to that? Why are people upset about that? It's like, well, then you're what if all the kids are going to that and then you're the only kid who my parents said I couldn't go? It's like, oh, what does that mean? Are you not inclusive of queer people? It's like pronouns in people's email signature. It's like, you don't have to put, this is what companies do. You don't have to put your pronouns in, but it's a sign of allyship. And if you don't have they don't explicitly say, well, if you don't have your pronouns in, you're a bad person. But the implication is like, well, all of the good people have their pronouns in their email signature. You don't have to do it, but all of the good allies do. It's like, okay, what is the obvious implication of that?
Okay,
it's a nuanced issue. But
the majority of children in a community, when a Drag Queen Story Hour is held, are not brought to these.
How do you know?
It's just the community. It just isn't. Just like how you're gonna really say the majority of a city's like population comes out and goes to an area.
A majority of the city.
Majority of the city, a majority of the area. Like
the class. Hey, Mrs. Francis' class is going to the library.
But it's not happening because it's not in schools. It's in these libraries that are separate from the schools. Okay. But
if Hooters was catering to the library, I'd have an equal issue.
No, I would be fine with that. I would actually be fine with Hooters.
Whoa!
Wait. Let me be. As long as they only kept it for adults, I wouldn't care. Yeah.
All right, if they kept Drag Queen Story Hour to adults.
Can I move back to kind of this earlier thing that Paul said that I had in my notes here, where he asked Dylan specifically, like, Dylan, why do you think that Hooters is overtly sexual?
Because it's part of the advertising strategy. It's part of what they're putting out there, and it's the way they present their employees. They present their employees as something to be augured out for sexual gratification. They don't present them as people to, like, oh, they're here to, like, present food to you and that's it. Like, when you talk about like these Drag Queen Story Hour performances, they're not being presented in a way that you're ogling at them sexually. That's not how they're presented. They're presented as storytellers and wacky characters. Like Paul was talking about, you could say they're just clowns, but they're presented in different ways, and also they wear different clothing. When you see these people do the Drag Queen Story Hour performances, they honestly have more clothing on than the average person.
Okay, so can I just say something real quick?
Yeah.
I'm trying to be good faith. But Dylan, when you say they're not like Drag Queen Story Hour, they are not being presented in a sexual way at all. I will agree with you that probably most instances of Drag Queen Story Hour or whatever it is not like that sexual. But there are instances of straight up sexual degeneracy that you and I would agree and call it that much. And I'm not going to pull up the video, but everyone has seen the video of the kid touching the drag performer up and down on the genital region. And it's like, okay, when you say drag queen is not about the sexuality, it's like, this is, fuck me for giving you advice or whatever, because don't take it. But it's like, it seems to me if you were honestly trying to really articulate ideas to people that you disagree with, you should not not validate the fact that they've seen those videos. And if you say, yes, there are obviously some instances of actual degeneracy, then you have people's ear more. But it's like, but when you say that's not what's happening, it's just like, dude, people see it happen.
My opening and closing statement was a condemnation of any type of sexual activity, and I even have said multiple times I've acknowledged that these things have happened. They're inappropriate. They're a minority, but they've happened. Right?
But
I
you just said
multiple times.
You just now said that's not. You said when drag queens are brought into in drag queen story hours, it is not for children to. They're not being oogled at, or it's not a sexual thing with children.
It's not a sexual thing.
Aside from
let me ask you a question.
The examples wait. That's wait.
Let's talk about
those examples.
The example you're talking about. Was this an example where a child went up and just touched the person inappropriately because the child's a dumb kid? Because there's a lot of dumb kids do, or was it the performer was like, is there any evidence that was the case? Because if that happens at schools, that happens at churches, that happens at people's homes, where a dumb kid does something inappropriate because they're dumb and they're a kid.
Can I pull up the video, Andrew?
I'm just. Okay, well then.
It's not that.
I don't know. I don't. And this happened at Drag Queen Story Hour, or was
with
this
the mermaid outfit? The drag artist is wearing like a mermaid outfit or something with like a skirt made of scales, and the child goes up to the performer, puts her hand on his crotch, and goes up and down multiple times, and the drag performer does nothing to stop.
Okay, well,
and that video has circled all over. And the fact that you're not even aware of that's my point. That you, in my opinion, just like the conservatives who've never gone to a drag show and know nothing about drag, have no idea why people are like, well, why would you defend this at all? It's like, because it's fun. The fact that you haven't even seen the single worst example of the degeneracy we're talking about.
Okay, number one, that is okay.
How can you even begin to speak to people you disagree with when you don't even know what their perspective is?
Okay, now you're virtue signaling. So it is not. No, you are virtue signaling now.
I'll pull up you know what? It's funny that it's
let me talk okay, well, whatever.
Well, you accuse me of virtue signaling.
Because I'm gonna. Can I justify my accusation? Okay, I think it's virtue signaling because the idea that I don't understand the struggle of conservative people seeing these videos.
That's not at all what I said. But go ahead.
The struggles of people with concerns, the centrist concerned people, because I didn't know the single example video that you're talking about, and I had questions about it, I think is being a little virtue signaling, because now you're extending this into like, oh, Dylan, like, I went out and I went to the thing. I went out to understand it, but you're not going out to understand these other people. I've acknowledged multiple times.
That's true, though.
I've acknowledged multiple times in this conversation. I've said, if those things happen, they're bad. It's the responsibility of parents to do more research, the possibility of drag performers to be responsible. And I talk about, like, there's examples of this happening. And I talked about that. I said that. I said that there's examples of this happening. And you can't just say that, like, oh, Dylan, because you didn't know this one video, now I know you don't truly care.
This is like a conservative saying, yes, I know black people get killed by the police. Yes, it happens. It's bad when it happens, but it's not a problem. It's not, people shouldn't worry about it. It's among the smallest problems. It's like, you can find a way to go, okay, yes, technically what you said is true. Black men getting shot by the police, unarmed black men getting killed by the police is comparatively a small problem in numbers, but it clearly has so much significance for that community. Again, going back to black community, but it's like, it's exactly the same thing where it's like conservatives have seen this video. It's extremely creepy and degenerate by your own standards. I guarantee you would agree, as you pointed out. And it's just what bothers me is when you say it's like it doesn't happen.
The reason why is the problem. I'm not saying it never happens. Period. Okay, I'm saying Drag Queen Story Hour hosts these things in a responsible manner. If this one example of a child coming up, touching the channel, touching the drag performer, and the drag performer didn't push him away enough, quick enough, I'd have to see the video. I don't know about the specific instance. Then that's bad. But Drag Queen Story Hour has generally been conducting themselves in a responsible manner, right? And I acknowledge that there are irresponsible things that occur either where there wasn't proper advertising or a parent brings their kid to an event they shouldn't have because they didn't do the proper research. I acknowledge that those things happen. But the problem is this the conversation in this country right now isn't, oh, I don't think this should be in schools, like the conversation we've had. The conversation in this country right now is we need to stop Drag Queen Story Hour from functioning. We need to stop them from going to libraries. We need to stop these performances from being around children at all, period. It should be illegal. We see laws being introduced in this country to ban children from interacting with drag whatsoever, making it illegal. I think there was one that tried to make it a felony or some shit. It's insane. And that I will push back upon to say there is no justification for that, and you cannot dump on all of an art, all the entirety of a type of art because of these examples of irresponsible behavior. The same way that I wouldn't say we need to stop rock concerts because somebody brought their kid to a Kid Rock concert and he sang a song about banging a 16-year-old. I would not say, wow, you know what? We need to ban rock concerts. Now, no more rock concerts. This conversation
is much deeper than just a conversation about Drag Queen Story Hour. And my point is that I think it is as loudly as you would condemn as I do, the conservatives say, well, gay people shouldn't exist, all that shit. As loudly as you condemn that shit, you should also as loudly condemn the examples of degeneracy which do exist. And you say it does happen and it's wrong. And I'm arguing that's not enough. And the reason that this is so divided is because people refuse to acknowledge. It's like talking about police shootings without seeing the George Floyd video.
What do I need to do? What do I need to do to make it so I'm condemning this enough for you? Because apparently condemnation isn't enough. But what else do I need to do? You're right.
To your point about virtue signaling, I apologize. After this, in the post, I'll pull up the video where we're not TOS. And that's all I'm going to ask you to see. And then you don't have to make a statement or anything. I'm not asking that. I'm just saying, if you see the video, you'll kind of go, okay, that's bad. And that's it. That's all I'm asking.
Paul, the super chatter asks, do you see what your mindset leaves you open to?
Being awesome.
Was that healthy dialogue with people I disagree with?
Is it healthy? Or is it contrary? Or is it contrary to your own worldview? Really? I mean, the whole thing. When we really break this down, isn't the whole thing that you consider this entire action, be honest, you consider the entire action, not just the fact that these things may occur where there's no victim and possibly no problem. You consider the entire action to be something that's degenerate.
No, I don't. I do think that there are examples, as Dylan pointed out, you can have.
Well, that's the problem, but that's the super chatter's point with the mindset. Is they're like, dude, you have this toe in, toe out, and that's why Burns is able to, you know what I mean?
I see. Well, I think that's absolutely nonsense because the idea that we can't walk in gray areas. It's like we literally do that all the time as human beings. We operate without full knowledge and full confidence in anything. We have to do that.
Okay, but if you acknowledge that we work in like shades of gray,
right,
like we've talked about how there are 100% drag shows that you acknowledge, as you just said, that aren't sexual. Why would you still say that children should still be in the presence of those performers?
No, like the what's the one, the Nina West one or whatever that you showed?
Yeah,
it's like, okay, West. Yeah, it's like, okay, that's right on the edge of like it's like taking the kids to Hooters. It's like if I see a kid at Hooters,
it's not even close. It's not even.
Yeah, I think it is because you know what?
In the same ballpark. Because the thing is, the photo you showed.
It's like taking a kid to the beach. To the beach. How about to the beach where there are women in bikinis?
No, it's
Do you
still
think
not,
if a kid goes to a beach, it's bad?
It's less sexual than going to the beach. The thing is when we talk about the specific photo that you showed, that's already
I agree, actually.
tame. Is what you're going to show on. You're going to see that on most red carpets. You're going to see that on most modern musicianists. But the thing is, when she goes and she reads books to children, or she goes and does some like Nickelodeon thing, the outfits that she has, it's like the most clothing. Like the only skin I see on her is her face, right? And so in that environment, like that isn't sexual at all. But you still think that should be done, or that you still say no to that, and I don't know for what reason. No, of course, all these other things like rock concerts and R&B and stuff, and those are fine. Like it does feel like you're kind of middling a bit,
because I see no value to it outside of there's no evidence.
What's the value to rock and roll? What's the value to R&B? What's the value to rap music? What's the value of anything that people enjoy as an art form substantively? Like it's enjoyment because people enjoy it. People enjoy it. People like sharing their culture. This isn't surprising anyone. You see the joy from people. I've seen people when I describe to somebody like that I knew their like culture's music or something while I was over in Ukraine, they were like super excited about it. You know, like when I know there's a lot of these ideas about cultural appropriation, right? And I don't want to get into specifics about that. But I do know that I've met so many people that are so excited to see other people like find out and share aspects of their culture and like, wow, you like our culture too? That's so cool. And the thing is, queer people can have that experience too.
Hey, Dylan, speaking of which, I'm just curious.
Yes, I don't disagree with
besides the fact that Ortho Eric says for $2 to become Orthodox PF,
in due time.
how were people in Ukraine? Did people in Ukraine have any drag story hour?
I did see like a few trans people, but I did not see any drag queen story hour. No. Ukraine is much behind us when it comes to LGBTQ plus segments. They're going in the right way. 2015, they instituted non-discrimination protections for trans people and queer people. Zelensky seems to be indicating they might be moving towards civil unions. I actually did a piece about the history of homosexuality in Ukraine on my YouTube channel if anybody wanted to check it out.
Okay. For $5, IXOY, I think E, whatever the letters are. Paul seems nice, but he has such a weak worldview that he gets blown away like dust. Right? You can't do the glass half empty. Glass half empty.
What did I say for the third time? I don't come to these to convince anyone. And clearly I'm not doing a good job at all. I come here to explain what I think and why I think differently from the person I'm talking to. That's it. If you don't like it, then take me to Orthodox Church or something.
No, well, we're going to do that at some point. We're going to have a Crucible get together. Anyway, gentlemen, before we wrap up, we're at the 2-hour mark. Thank you so much for coming on tonight and having this spirited debate. Usually we get bogged down in more callers. I think the reason we didn't tonight is because we had a debate just before this one. But take a second, Dylan Burns, one more time, and shout your channel out where everybody can find you.
Sure, you can find me streaming on my channel Mondays through Fridays, 6 p.m. to midnight at Dylan Burns TV. That's DYLANBURNS TV. You can also find my website at DylanBurns.tv, DYLANBURNS.tv. That's where you can support me. You can also find me on Twitter at DylanBurns1776, on YouTube at Dylan Burns TV, Instagram Dylan Burns TV. We also have a Discord that posts the only foreign policy memes. I concentrate on foreign policy. I concentrate on the news. I do debates, obviously. And I concentrate on Ukraine. I'm going to be going back to Ukraine in January, February. At least that's the plan. Go back to film with possibly some IED crews and stuff. So
you need to see these. You need to see these super chats, Paul. You need to see them. You need to see what the members are saying, Paul. Paul, shout your channel out real quick.
Yes.
Tell everybody where they can
I base my opinions and social worth based on the Crucible chat comments and how much Reddit karma I have.
You fucking love those people, and you know it.
I love all people, even you, Andrew.
You sound like Kanye.
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, I think that was a Nazi reference, Paul.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Dylan. Once again, I almost got contentious, but I know we're both used to this space, so I'm sure it's no hard feelings, and I do think more aligned in a lot of ways than
yeah. No worries.
My takeaway from this, so I appreciate it. What am I have a channel called PF
Kabuki shows, okay?